Verses 18 to 22. That the God of the whole earth was, in a particular manner, the God of this people Israel, a God in covenant with them, and that he had given them a revelation of his mind and will, such as he had not given to any other nation or people, so that hereby they were distinguished from, and dignified above, all their neighbors, having peculiar precepts to be governed by, and peculiar promises to depend upon. That he had chosen their fathers to be his friends, Abraham was called the friend of God, to be his prophets, by whom he would reveal his mind to his church, and to be the trustees of his covenant with the church. He puts them in mind of this, to let them know that the reason why God favored them, though undeserving, and ill-deserving, was because he would adhere to the choice he had made of their fathers, do. 7:7, 8. They were beloved purely for the fathers' sakes, Rom 11:28. That he had exalted that people, and put a great deal of honor upon them, had advanced them into a people, and raised them from nothing, when they dwelt as strangers in the land of Egypt, and had nothing in them to recommend them to the divine favor. They ought to remember this, and to infer hence that God was no debtor to them, for it was ex mero motu out of his mere good pleasure, and not upon a valuable consideration, that they had the grant of the divine favor, and therefore it was revocable at pleasure, and God did them no wrong if he at length plucked up the hedge of their peculiarity. But they were debtors to him, and obliged to receive such further discoveries as he should make to his church. That he had with a high hand brought them out of Egypt, where they were not only strangers, but captives, had delivered them at the expense of a great many miracles, both of mercy to them and judgment on their oppressors, signs and wonders, do 4:34, and at the expense of a great many lives, all the firstborn of Egypt, Pharaoh and all his host, in the Red Sea, I gave Egypt for thy ransom, gave men for thee. Isa 43:3, 4. That he had suffered their manners 40 years in the wilderness, v18, Itropa 4:sen. Some think it should be read, Itropo 4:sen he educated them, because this is the word the Septuagint use concerning the fatherly care God took of that people, do. 131. Both may be included, for, 1. God made a great deal of provision for them for 40 years in the wilderness, miracles were their daily bread, and kept them from starving, they lacked not anything. 2. He exercised a great deal of patience with them. They were a provoking, murmuring, unbelieving people, and yet he bore with them, did not deal with them as they deserved, but suffered his anger many a time to be turned away by the prayer and intercession of Moses. So many years as we have each of us lived in this world, we must own that God has thus been as a tender father to us, has supplied our wants, has fed us all our life long unto this day, has been indulgent to us, a God of pardons, as he was to Israel, Na 9:17, and not extreme to mark what we have done amiss, we have tried his patience, and yet not tired it. Let not the Jews insist too much upon the privileges of their peculiarity, for they have forfeited them 1,000 times. That he had put them in possession of the land of Canaan, v19 when he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, that were doomed to be rooted out to make room for them, he divided their land to them by lot, and put them in possession of it. This was a signal favor of God to them, and he owns that hereby a great honor was put upon them, from which he would not in the least derogate. That he had raised up men, inspirited from heaven, to deliver them out of the hands of those that invaded their rights, and oppressed them after their settlement in Canaan, v20:21. He gave them judges, men qualified for public service, and, by an immediate impulse upon their spirits, called to it, pro re nata as the occasion required. Though they were a provoking people, and were never in servitude but their sin brought them to it, yet upon their petition a deliverer was raised up. The critics find some difficulty in computing these 450 years. From the deliverance out of Egypt to David's expulsion of the Jebusites from the stronghold of Zion, which completed the casting out of the heathen nations, was 450 years, and most of that time they were under judges. Others thus, the government of the judges, from the death of Joshua to the death of Eli, was just 339 years, but it is said to be as it were 450 years, because the years of their servitude to the several nations that oppressed them, though really they were included in the years of the judges, are yet mentioned in the history as if they had been distinct from them. Now these, all put together, make 111 years, which added to the 339, make them 450, as so many, though not really so many. He governed them by a prophet, Samuel, a man divinely inspired to preside in their affairs. He afterwards at their request set a king over them, v. 21, Saul, the son of Cis. Samuel's government and his lasted 40 years, which was a kind of transition from the theocracy to the kingly government. At last, he made David their king, v. 22. When God had removed Saul, for his maladministration, he raised up unto them David to be their king, and made a covenant of royalty with him, and with his seed. When he had removed one king, he did not leave them as sheep without a shepherd, but soon raised up another, raised him up from a mean and low estate, raised him up on high. 2 Sa. 23:1. He quotes the testimony God gave concerning him, first, that his choice was divine, I have found David, PS 89:20. God himself pitched upon him. Finding implies seeking, as if God had ransacked all the families of Israel to find a man fit for his purpose, and this was he. Secondly, that his character was divine, a man after my own heart, such a one as I would have, one on whom the image of God is stamped, and therefore one in whom God is well pleased and whom he approves. This character was given of him before he was first anointed, 1 Sa. 13:14. The Lord hath sought out a man after his own heart, such a one as he would have. Thirdly, that his conduct was divine, and under divine direction, he shall fulfill all my will. He shall desire and endeavor to do the will of God, and shall be enabled to do it, and employed in the doing of it, and go through with it. Now all this seems to show not only the special favor of God to the people of Israel, with the acknowledgement of which the apostle is very willing to oblige them, but the further favors of another nature which he designed them, and which were now, by the preaching of the gospel, offered to them. Their deliverance out of Egypt, and settlement in Canaan, were types and figures of good things to come. The changes of their government showed that it made nothing perfect, and therefore must give way to the spiritual kingdom of the Messiah, which was now in the setting up, and which, if they would admit it and submit to it, would be the glory of their people Israel, and therefore they needed not conceive any jealousy at all of the preaching of the gospel, as if it tended in the least to damage the true excellences of the Jewish Church.